recording.
Okay. Hello, everybody. It's really good to have you with us tonight or today or wherever you are. Evening for Christian and afternoon for us, and others probably morning. So, welcome. Um, we're having a beautiful snowstorm here on the east coast of the USA. Uh, and I'm getting to look out my window and watch it come down. So, that's pretty special. So, Christian and I are two women who have extensive experience in the field of addictions. And a year ago today, everyone, a year ago today, we published a book. It actually came out a year ago today called Addiction, One Cause, One Solution, Recovery from the Inside Out. And because it hit right at the time of the pandemic and we weren't able to do all of the travel and talks and, book launches and things that we were planning, we decided to have this series of webinars where we sort of go through the book and talk more at length about what's happening, what we've written, and get some of your input. So the first part of this will be, for those of you who are new to this, is we'll ask you to turn off your video and turn off your audio. And after we are done talking for the first 20 minutes, we'll invite you to come back on. So we really wanted to maintain people's confidentiality in that way. So, whether you're newly sober or whether you know someone who is struggling in sobriety or whether you're a professional, we hope that this understanding that we're describing here will be a help to you. And we're really excited that you can all be here to help us celebrate our year anniversary of this being in print. And, and we hope that you've gotten something important out of it. So with that, today we're going to be talking about triggers and cravings, which is a big topic in the field of addiction treatment. And Christian is going to start us off. So whenever you're ready.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Barbara. And yeah, I'd like to just say welcome everybody as well. Um, uh, yeah, just to recap, I much of my experience of addiction was of the practical kind. I had a drinking problem. I got sober in my 20s, and that was long before I came across the inside out understanding. And when I did come across the inside out understanding, it really filled in a lot of gaps and explained a lot of things that I hadn't understood about myself and my recovery. And it also showed me some of the ways in which I'd made life really more difficult for myself than it needed to be. Um, Turning to to tonight's topic, um, which was chapter 11, triggers and cravings. We just wanted to read a tiny bit out from the beginning of that chapter. It starts, there is a great deal of wisdom in the suggestion that addicts place a distance between themselves and their substance of choice at the beginning of their sobriety journey. As we have seen, our thoughts and moods change from moment to moment. In the early days of recovery, a flash of insight may prompt abstinence only to be followed by some very changeable thoughts and ideas. Familiar people, places, and things associated with the old lifestyle and habit patterns can invite euphoric recall of drinking and using. And when I got sober through a 12-step problem, I wasn't actually in a treatment center. And there was certainly loads of well-meaning advice given to me in the early days of recovery. And when I was thinking about this meeting tonight and how I see things now, one of the things that occurred to me was that even from early on, I have come to see. I'm certainly speaking for myself, but I also notice this in other people that I work with, that we do have a sense of what's right for us and what's wrong, what's not right for us. And I thought that perhaps I could give you, just a couple of examples from my own life. So one was that I was in my 20s when I got sober, and here in Scotland where I live, that a great deal of social life happens in pubs or in places that serve alcohol. And there was a sort of general admonition in recovery, don't go near pubs and clubs. But I somehow knew for myself that I was okay doing that up to a point. It was fine for me to meet friends. I'm not talking about the first day or the first week, but I quite quickly knew that was okay for me. If I was meeting a pal or something like that. But I also knew very clearly, and again from very early on, I could never work in a bar again. And I didn't work in a bar at that time, but I had done in the past as a student and so on. And I knew that, and I still feel like that today. But the point I'm trying to make is that um, it seems to me that each of us, in our wisdom, has a sense of, where's a green light, where's a red light for behavior. And some of the traditional recovery advice was very much about overriding that, listening to other people instead. And while that was well-meaning, and while it may have its place, for me it was a mistake to allow that to become a substitute for tuning in and trusting myself. And another example that I had early on was I decided that because my life had now changed through getting sober, that it'd be a good idea to go on a ski holiday and do something active and be out of doors. But a friend of mine who was in recovery asked me, do you think that's a good idea? I mean, you're going to be going and staying in a place where you're full board and wine's included and everything. There's just an awful lot of drinking going on, and and it struck me that he was right there. And that might sound like I'm contradicting what I just said about the inner yes or no, but what I'm suggesting is not a kind of arrogant I always know best and I never listen to anybody, but that the right advice and the right kind of questioning can actually help elicit that inner yes or no. Because it I could see when he asked me that question that I would be putting myself in a position where I couldn't get away from it if I was hit with temptation, where it would be like working in the bar. There was something that was a definite red light for me in that scenario. And it seems to me that all of that goes to something that we wrote on a couple of pages on in chapter 11, which, and it's part of this that I just love, and it's part of this that I've loved since I came across the inside out understanding. And the way we expressed it there was, your mind has the ability to discern truth from theories. And there's many ways that can be put, but I think what it's touching on is a deep truth that we actually do have everything that we need within us. And I saw that when I encountered this understanding. But I would say that much of what my inquiry, my curiosity, my journey since then has been about becoming clearer about what my inner voice or my inner guidance or my red light and my green light are. And the the clearer I am, the more delightful that is. I mean, it really is delightful to have that sense that there is an inner GPS, that there's something that I can rely on as a kind of um, guide through life. So, Barbara, I'm moving away from the topic of cravings and triggers, and I don't know if you want to bring us back to that. And
Yeah. Well, I think it is about really learning how to trust. And in the world that I worked in for many years, for over 30 years, the addiction field, it was believed and taught regularly that people, places, and things had to be avoided at all costs. And we would set out, especially in early recovery, to convince people, convince recovering addicts that they needed to limit their lives. They needed to change their lifestyles. They needed to change pretty much everything in their life. And again, as we said, as in that first paragraph that Christian read to you, there's a great deal of wisdom in that early on. Because often our addictive thinking is so powerful at the outset that we really can't hear our wisdom well, and the habitual way that the mind works when you've been doing something for a long period of time can sweep us off our feet. So one of the things that Christian and I really wanted to do in this book is to not in any way uh, make light of the danger and the risk that can happen when people don't see themselves and their addiction with clarity. There are people in the principles world and in the world in general who say, oh, you can have a drink, it's all good, all you have to do is know it's all you're thinking and you'll be fine. And we both feel very strongly, both of us have seen firsthand. I've lost a number of people. Those of you who read my latest post, I've lost a number of clients and patients when I was working in the treatment center who died as a result of a relapse. So we're taking it seriously. I want people to hear that. We're not in any way trying to write this off. Thought is extraordinarily powerful. It can convince us of things that look so true, and it can literally sweep us off our feet. But when you start to cultivate, and I think maybe that's a good way of thinking about it, you're the part of you that can listen for inner wisdom. I think you learn to develop more of a trust rather than going through your life not trusting yourself, not trusting your internal wisdom to guide you and direct you. So I just wanted to read a paragraph a little bit further on too, that if we buy into the belief that we are unable to trust our inner wisdom, once our sobriety stabilizes and our minds become clearer, it paints us into a corner. If we cannot trust ourselves, we are rudderless, looking to other people or practices to keep us grounded. The perceived need to fearfully avoid events, people, places, and things makes our lives much smaller and constrictive. So one of the things that, Christian and I, when we were talking, I said, as I've been reflecting on this, I look back to the numbers of people that I've known over the course of my life who figured it out really early on in their lives. Most in college. I used to do these interviews for the Peace Corps where we did alcohol and drug evaluations. And there were a lot of kids who got into trouble in college, but most, I think there's some sort of statistic, most kids outgrow it, they get beyond it. But a lot of them figured it out early on, like, I can't handle this stuff. Like, this stuff is killing me. This stuff isn't good for me. And I, to this day, have friends in their 60s and 70s who know I can't touch red wine. Like, I can't touch the hard stuff. And their wisdom guided them to that. So I think for addicts, when we get caught up in our thinking that there is something in this substance that's going to do something for us, we override that wisdom. And when we override it, we aren't in alignment with how well and how beautiful it can work. Not the least of which is sometimes you need to check with someone and ask them, does this make sense to you? That's one of the things that I think we get out of 12-step meetings that people can get, is to hear, maybe that's not such a great idea. So that was my take on it, that people, places, and things are the outside in misunderstanding. There is nothing, if you think about it, one day you can walk past a liquor store and you'll be fine. And the next day you walk past a liquor store and it's almost like you've got a homing device to go into that liquor store. Well, it's not the liquor store, because if it was the liquor store, you'd be there each time. You may be there a lot, but you're not there each time because your mind is on something else. And when you can see that that's what's happening, that is what gives you the alignment with the way our minds are designed for success and for to help us get through life and to discern truth.
It was a really nice reminder, Barbara, what you said there about um, the wise thing sometimes being to run it by another person, whatever it is, whatever it is, and and when I talk about us having everything that we need within us, it's not to imply there's some kind of universal declaration of independence and never taking advice or never you're never using anybody else as a sounding board. I mean, because sometimes it's an incredible clarity and synergy that occurs in a very authentic conversation when coming from that place of, I just don't know what to do about this situation. I think there's a great deal of power in I don't know as well. Just authentically acknowledging that, which is happens surprisingly frequently for me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So being open, I think being open to listening, not only to your own inner wisdom, but to the wisdom of other people around you, and seeking out people who can offer you sound advice. It was interesting. I was telling Christian, I heard Oprah interviewing James Taylor. And for those of you who don't know who James Taylor is, maybe you don't, I don't know, but he's a folk singer, a 1960s folk singer who became a very severe heroin addict. And he was saying to Oprah that, um, you know, when you enjoy something way too much, that's probably a good idea to avoid it, when it comes to certain substances or different things, that red light, green light thing is, again, is a built-in capacity that our minds have to go, whoa, whoa. But so often, for addicts, their thinking overrides that. And what was interesting for him was that his family uh, were part of the Civil War, several generations ago, and they were told, it was passed down to his family to avoid opiates. His great grandfather or something had gotten really hooked on opiates during, when he was wounded in the Civil War, and so that wisdom was passed down, and yet he didn't listen, he didn't take it in, he wasn't receptive, he didn't see it. But then he finally did see it, and in a very simple way was able to say, just know that if you really like something this much, there's probably something not so good about that, because you will. I mean, think about that. If we overeat anything, if we, overeat ice cream or overeat, carbohydrates, you make yourself physically sick. That's your body, working in conjunction with your body and your internal wisdom, it seems to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, another thing that occurred to me, Barbara, is how useful it can be to notice when you do override that the red light, which seems to be the theme I'm going with tonight. And I was that James Taylor story reminded me of early in my recovery, from the get-go, it was kind of banged into, if you don't pick up the first drink, you can't get drunk, and it's not the last drink that does it, it's the first drink that does it. And I think for me, there's certainly some truth in that. I didn't know it before I got sober, but after I got sober, I could see that. And when I was about 3 or 4 months sober, I stopped smoking, and I did much more internal conflict over being a smoker in many ways than for much of the time drinking. But that was fine. And then one night something happened. There's a bit of a stressful situation that I found myself in, and or I found myself stressing in my own mind. I'll put it that way. And I was at a sort of social thing, and a friend of mine was there, and I had a cigarette, and I kind of knew that that you know, that I couldn't smoke in safety either. But I sort of thought I'll be okay. I just want a draw of her cigarette and I'll be okay. And that's why I had that night. And within 2 days, I was back on it worse than ever. It was just unbelievable. I couldn't explain. I just couldn't, you know, I couldn't explain it or what, you know, and I had no control over it anymore. And it took about 9 months until I was able to stop again. But it was a great lesson for me in the power of ignoring the, you know, yeah, my ego can deal with this. And I also in a way was grateful because I thought well, I certainly didn't need to prove that thing about the first drink to myself because I'd seen the same process when I picked up a cigarette. And you know, I stopped smoking as well eventually after that 9 months. And thank God. But yeah, so I think it's, even if we do make a mistake by our own lights according to our own standards, that's not wasted either. You know, that we can see what that, you know, what is the thing where did my thinking go wrong, where did I override my wisdom, where did I not listen to the thing that was good for me? And you know, often that's there just in plain sight, and, you know, just in a very simple way, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And often, you know, it takes a few times. You know, I mean, there are people who certainly get it in one shot, but for most of us, you know, we have to keep, as that old, you know, parable tells us, you keep walking down the road and falling in the hole for a period of time. I think that's part of the human condition that you start to see after you learn. You know, I used to work with this old recovering heroin addict, Teddy, who used to always say, "So, are you done with the research yet?" You know, but you know, I guess we have to find out in the time it takes us to find out.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
thought we could just talk for 1 minute before we open it up about cravings, because I think a lot of people, you know, I think it's important to talk about cravings. Once a craving gets a hold of someone, a craving being a physiological, the mind is so powerful, our thinking is so powerful that it sets off a whole cascade of biophysiological aspects. You know, again, if you, this morning I walked into a bakery on my way home from my brother's house, and just the smell of all these pastries, you know, my mouth was watering. I was a little shaky, like, I'm not going to get one. I'm not going to get one. And then I got them. I got them. And, but, you know, I really noticed it. It was like, yeah, I got to have one of these croissants. And so anyway, when a thought, it goes unchecked, and there's a real desire for something, it is so powerful that it will actually cause your body to have physical symptoms. And those physical symptoms may show up as a tremulousness, as salivating. It sets off the whole system in our neurological system that really feels, you know, if you've heard people talking about jonesing for something, you know, you really desperately want it. And so we used to always say in the treatment center that you want to try to catch it before you get to the craving. But, you know, all the tools that we would give people to try to catch it before it got to the craving didn't seem to do any good. But I think that's one place where understanding that it is always and only our thinking and the way we're thinking about the substance in any given moment that's creating the experience that we're having of that. And once you can wake up to that early on in the process, it puts the brakes on before the physicality of it sets in and it becomes so much harder to deal with. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add about that, Christian.
Well, I always feel a bit of a fraud talking about cravings because I've never resisted a craving, and it's but and I think you know, for me, both the need to the irresistible need to drink, which I had every day, was kind of lifted out of me, and something. It wasn't quite the same with smoking, but it was sort of similar. You know, there was a sort of healing at the desire level, and it seems to me that that, you know, that didn't occur to me by any virtue of mine, or any effort of mine, but it is evidence of the power of mind, you know, the fact that we can be transformed, that something changed at a deep level in me, and therefore those desires and cravings were removed. Thank God. Because if I get a similar sort of craving for something sweet, for example, my tendency would be to give in. I haven't mastered those yet, Barbara. Maybe that's another book.
I think that is another book. But you know, sometimes it's okay. You know, I mean, it's if it's not going to kill you, I'm not going to die from eating a croissant. You know, but that's where our wisdom comes in.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think, you know, knowing that number one, thought passes, and most cravings and thoughts will pass if you wait long enough, and all on their own without you doing anything. And then again, the power of mind that, and the spiritual reaction that people have, um, you know, that when we see something deeper, our cravings and our thoughts really can be removed. Not so much our thoughts, but certainly our cravings. That people, you hear that all the time in 12-step program. It was lifted from me. And that's a deeper experience of what it is we're talking about with mind. So maybe now it's time to open it up.
Yeah, I'm just noticing Jean said she's had to go, but yeah,
Okay.
um, I'm gonna